Karen, I imagine there's plenty that you feel worthy of comment on.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is all really interesting discussion, and I think I agree with Lord Robertson. I think that we do need to look more carefully at how we exercise. So, in the kind of civilian sector and civil protection sector, and I think that we need to get better at that, because we need to look at exactly what it is we're trying to test. I mean, I think quite often, sometimes these exercises can be a tick box exercise. So an organisation might have a series of plans that they need to test, so they'll do that through an exercise. But it comes back to my point about learning. How do we actually learn better from these things? How do we design exercises to really test something to destruction? Because we're not very good at doing that, because that's quite a challenging area to have to go into, to actually test something till it breaks. And no one really wants to do that, because then you will sort of open up, a lot of things in your organisation that perhaps you don't want to open up. But why are we frightened of doing that? Because we'll get better at being prepared for crises if we are brave enough to do that and to learn from it effectively.
I would go back to my point that if you want to test something to destruction, you have to do the other stuff first. You have to do the training and the exercising, the capability development, which I don't think will take very long to test most of our frameworks to destruction, because the underlying fundamental capabilities may not be there. David Alexander, let's bring you
in. Yes, there really isn't a great deal of academic work on emergency exercises, but there is a smaller increasing amount. And I do recommend the work of Dr. Ralph Behrens of the Netherlands Institute of Safety, who did his PhD thesis recently on emergency exercises, partly under my supervision at Lund University in Sweden. And one of his objectives was to develop standards for exercises. And I think this could be very useful. Standards are good if they don't constrain, but they enable. And I think Ralph was very keen to create the kind of standard that would guide and help and support, rather than being a negative factor in the design and execution, and above all, the evaluation of exercises. But he would always argue that the most important thing about the exercise is the evaluation of it. An evaluation which is not about did they do well or did they do badly, but it's about what could be learned from it, what are the lessons of it, what could be improved in a very positive spirit. Thank you.
It's always amazing to me how people put the time and the effort into putting together exercises. I was involved in Exercise Unified Response in 2006, which many of you will be aware of. But you put the effort into the getting stuff done. You don't put any effort into, well, okay, what have we learned and how can we use that to build next stage developments? Toby, let's bring you in, and then we'll try and go around the table one more time and bring everybody in again.
Okay, three probably rather unrelated points. Firstly, there is a tremendous preoccupation amongst many politicians that the solution to anything is let's bring in the army. And on the basis that the army's got this magic ability to come and sort things out. And George listed some of the things where the army did come in and sort it out. Part of the problem, though, is have we invested enough in the army over the years to enable it to deal with anything very much bigger? Floods in one county, send the army in, and yes, you can sort it. If you've got major crises right the way across the country, there isn't enough resource to spread that thinly. So the important bit is to try and establish those things that the army and the military are good at, why they're good at them, and how much of that you can transplant into wider emergency response, crisis preparations, and so on. And part of that's about exercising and thinking it. The other thing is, I think there is we talked about exercises should be challenging, and exercises may mean you don't pass, and therefore you should pick up on that. they've also got to feel that degree of credibility. So there's actually a bit of a balancing act to be done. It mustn't be so challenging that people, that could never happen. I mean, it's a bit like the debrief after an exercise where people say, well, I thought it was really good until that point when you said the Martians had landed, at which point I just lost it altogether. It's about how you make it feel relevant, plausible, but actually, gosh, we hadn't thought about that in the first point. And then the last one comes back to this issue around lessons. And I can point to exercises where actually the good guys didn't win, and it was true that things had really gone wrong. And it was so embarrassing that actually the whole thing is just kept quiet and suppressed, and nobody takes action on the issues. So it's how you learn those lessons, how you embed those lessons in practice. And that's something which has got to be done both in terms of the public sector response, the emergency services, government agencies and so on, but it's also got to be looked at in terms of other organisations as to how they are going to respond to these things and prepare for it. So this question of how you embed learning is going to be critical.
I think I read somewhere, and George, I'm sure that you know this much better than I do. I'm sure James and Toby do, probably David and Karen as well. But I think before Operation Enduring Freedom into Iraq in 2001, they brought in an old Vietnam general to play the side of the Iraqis, and he won every time. And so they basically got rid of him and brought in somebody else. So I'm not sure that happened back in time. I can certainly believe it. James, can I ask you something? I was quite shocked. I didn't know that I heard yesterday that your forum has been disbanded under House of Lords rules. There's nothing malicious about it, but it no longer exists. We talk about continuity. We talk about sustainability. What do you see, as somebody who's been absolutely at the heart of this conversation, what do you see as next stages forward in terms of actually sort of helping this country, maybe on a wider community basis, get better at this sort of thing?
The committee no longer exists because it was set up on the basis that it was a short-term committee. The House of Lords has various standing select committees that deal with large overarching themes. But on this occasion, Lord Rees went to see the committee that sets up short-term committees and said, look, we got this risk management and risk assessment process wrong, as has been shown by COVID. Let's have a short-term committee to see whether we can get it right. And so that was always going to be the case. But the things we turned up, I agree with George, it was an eye-opener. And the things we turned up do need long-term thinking, unlike most of the risk management and risk planning processes that we currently have. So we need long-term thinking. So we are trying to engineer life after death for the committee. The meeting that we had yesterday with Toby's National Preparedness Commission was one strand of that life after death, and we do hope that Toby's commission will be able to set in train various inquiries and papers to hold the government and other people to account. It's a bit like, what's that Harry Potter thing? A Horcrux. Toby is our Horcrux, carrying on our life, even though we no longer exist. With any luck, the Institute of Strategic Risk Management might be able to form a similar function, and various other organizations too will be asked to see what you can all do to keep these questions alive, because it is essential. These are important questions which need continuing analysis and scrutiny. Otherwise, governments will just let them drop because they're difficult.